Good evening. It is Tuesday, June 28th, and we're here for our night meeting in the chamber. We got a full slate of commissioners. We got the administrator and the clerk of the board. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everybody to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from June 14th and June 15th. Is there any additions, corrections?
No
Okay.
additions or corrections as
Okay.
far as I can see.
Next item on the agenda is the office business, the vouchers.
We have 2 vouchers today. Move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $474,527.81 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Was that payroll or warrants?
This is fund expenditures.
So warrants. Second?
Made a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $1,075,429.11 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next on the agenda is the consent agenda, which has 2 items on it today.
Move for approval of consent agenda as presented, 2 items.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the 2 items on the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Next on the agenda is the Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of a short week for me. I was out of the office for a couple of days at the end of last week, but last Thursday spent most of the morning in interviews with fellow board members of the Benton County Emergency Services Organization. We're in the process of recruiting a new executive director for the CCOM Operations Center. Technically, that is a City of Richland employee. They are the administrative agency, but the board members of BCES were allowed to participate in that. So I expect that that process will continue, and then they will be announcing a new executive director in the next short period of time, but I don't have exact time frame for that, but that's coming up. Also spent quite a bit of time with our folks at McKinstry looking at the energy audit for HAPO. You'll recall that last week I asked for the board's kind of approval to move forward with a final proposal. We weren't able to update all of those numbers in time for tonight's meeting, so we will do that at our next Tuesday meeting. In addition to that, also kind of on the same line of work, the public safety building HVAC project. Jennifer Wagner has been quarterbacking that for us with another company, and we expect to have that proposal before the board as well next week. Then had our monthly county administrators conference call with the counterparts across the state, kind of summarizing some of the legislative efforts of this past year and looking for how we might best coordinate with the Wasatch Legislative Steering Committee for the upcoming session. That'll be a big session starting in January of next year. So that's most of what I got. Thank you.
Commissioner Peck.
So let's see, had a meeting this week with the UAS committee, which is part of the State Aviation Committee under State Department of Commerce. The UAV or UAS is the unpiloted aerial vehicle systems. Turns out there's a lot more heavy drone activity in the state than I realized, including our own PNNL operating right here out of the airport with a hangar, one of the largest drone operators in the state, both by flight hours and size of drones. HAFIC meeting, Hanford Area Economic Financial Investment Trust, is working with the Benton Franklin Council of Governments, presented the notion of perhaps consolidating our loan programs to reduce the administrative costs that the public ultimately pays for to administer small loans to local governments and private business. Met with City of Pasco manager and deputy manager and staff and consultants on the Broadmoor Interchange project, going through the proposed tax increment financing plan. If you have not already, I suspect you'll have the same conversation with them. I think Commissioner Mullen has, and Commissioner Diddy are still scheduled. Lots of good discussion, big project. And Legislative Steering Committee with State Association of Counties. We met today, myself and my co-chair from Jefferson County, met with the Wasatch staff to lay out the process for Wasatch to select which bills and issues we will pursue with the legislature in the upcoming 2023 session. That's all in preparation for a Wasatch LSC meeting in September, where we'll actually make the selection of which issues and which bills we go after on behalf of the 39 counties. And then today had a meeting with about 40 representatives, the entire Washington State Aviation Advisory Committee, appointed by the governor to advise the legislature in the upcoming session on what investments and legislation to put forward to improve the economics of the aviation industry in Washington. And that was this afternoon. The previous one I mentioned about aviation is a subcommittee of the meeting that met today. That's it. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
So last week I had Visit Tri-Cities meeting. Also took part of the signature verification training for the county canvassing board. Local decision makers briefing. Benefits committee participated in that. Also had the discussion on the Broadmoor development at Road 100 with the TIF financing. Attended the Wasatch meeting. Also had Pasco Chamber of Commerce board meeting. That was today. Upcoming events there are the Sagebrush Scramble and the Crawfish Festival, which there you have a special online if you're interested in going. The specials are good till July 5th. You get 3 pounds of crawfish and a t-shirt for $50. And that is it for last week.
Well, I had a pretty short work week too. I had a workforce development meeting. Had 3 constituents get a hold of me about the mental health board that we have assembled. Had a meeting this morning with a family that had a son that he's 15 years clean, and he was inquiring about this committee about how the last person's picked. Is it only restricted to the people that signed up to be on the board, or could be anybody?
I don't believe there's any restriction to just those that have applied. The only restriction is the language of the ordinance that was adopted, or the resolution that was adopted, that identified that individual to be somebody with quote unquote lived experience, which we generally conclude means that they personally have been involved with mental health or substance use issues, or a member of their immediate family, someone who has affected their life. It's designed not to be a mental health professional, somebody who treats patients or conducts therapy, but somebody who's been impacted by mental health or substance use. So as far as I know, that would be the only limitation.
Yeah, because he was inquiring. He's 15 years, clean, and he's been helping other people that are addicted. So he's been giving counseling and helping people. So he's perfect fit. It's up to them to pick, though.
If you would like to just direct him to me, I'll be happy to put him in contact or get his information.
I already did, and I
Okay.
think Ms. Milham has already given you that. And then I got a call from a constituent up north. Last year, they had an incident where some people were hunting, they were trespassing and hunting. They shot a buck and the guy got pretty excited and he had a heart attack and died. The emergency vehicles then, to get to him, didn't consult with the farmer, and it took him 25 more minutes to get there. And he called me today because he was, he's been stewing on it, and it's been working on him. And because they cut through a fence, they drove through some ground that no one's allowed to be on, but I know emergency vehicles have special access. But I think there needs to be some coordination here with the property owners about, because there was a roadway that would have taken him right to him, and they might have saved his life if he would have consulted with him. And I'll direct him to you too, Keith, so you can talk to him.
Yeah, I'd be happy to communicate that information to the sheriff's office, which would obviously be responsible for trespassing type issues, but coordination with the fire and ambulance districts to.
Might save a life, because he said he could have gotten there 25 minutes earlier, and they wouldn't have been going across property that they weren't even, people aren't supposed to drive on. And then the last thing was, this morning I received an email here from our auditor's office about about unjustified payments of vehicle allowance.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Point of order?
Yeah, we're supposed to be briefing our week's activities and meetings. We all got the same email. If you want to bring that up and have a discussion, I'd submit that that's appropriately a separate agenda item.
The chair recognizes the point of order. This is something that happened in the last week that is new today. All of you could have made note of it. None of you did, and I'm going to. This was a very well done, went through, read it, looked at the whole documentation, and it's a very well done report. And the facts are so compelling that I think that we need an independent review, because this is twice now that our travel vouchers have been abused. So I'm calling for an independent review.
Mr. Chairman, I would, point of order, advise you to choose your words carefully right now when you start accusing people of abusing a process. Just a piece of friendly advice from the board, and on the record.
It's on the record. I take that advice from the commissioner that also was known to have abused this too.
I encourage you to be very careful, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that encouragement.
Good.
But did you write a check back? Yes. Did you write a check back to the courthouse?
I'm not going to debate it with you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Peck.
Take your schoolyard bully nonsense somewhere else.
No, this is, I ran to be an accountable, to have an open, transparent, and accountable government, and I'm going to make sure that it is that when I'm here, Commissioner Peck.
Yeah. Well, you got 2 more years to do that, right? So listen, Mr. Chairman, as long as we're on the subject, you brought it up, there are independent agencies that look into this, including the State Auditor's Office. The information's been submitted to them. The document is a public record, and it's my contention that you're merely using it for political harassment in a meeting. So
these are taxpayers' funds, Commissioner Peck. Taxpayers' money that has been abused.
Posture all you want.
I believe you're
Why don't we let, that's nothing to gain here. Why don't you just let the process run its course, let the investigators do what they do?
I think the public has the right to know.
And you've gone well beyond that already, I think.
All right, state fact, this is public record, everybody can see it.
Okay.
So that's the end of my report, and we will move down to public comment.
Commissioner Didier, I understand that you felt that report was very well-written.
Yes.
And I was able to read that too. It looks like they spent a lot of time on that. It was a very well-written, but they failed to mention some points. And the biggest point was that The PA office was never notified that they changed the policy on how the car allowance was going to be submitted to Sean Sant. I have exhibits of every single outline of what happened. I was notified about this today. I am the one that processes Sean's car allowance, and while I don't understand, you know, obviously, I should have probably been part of the agenda summary report, or our office should have been, because how would I know not to continue to process payment like I've done for 15 years in this office without them letting me know? And I even went to Matt Beaton, and he searched, and he couldn't find anything where he notified Sean or he notified me. And I take offense to this. I feel very much like I've been slandered because I take my job very seriously. I feel like I always joke with Sean, my job is to keep him off of the front page of the Tri-City Herald. I try to help him keep in line. And I take offense to this. There was no mention ever to me that this was changed. I have processed this paperwork this way for 15 years, and I have every documentation. I went to the budget hearing. I come to the budget hearing every year with Sean, and I have right here my budget report that I sent, my preliminary budget for 2022, and it states in there, travel allowance for Sean. And then I even have an exhibit that my budget status report shows me paying the travel allowance like I've done every year. And I had printed the report on June 16th. This was prior to me even finding out that this was an issue. I have it right here that I printed out on June 16th. And I look over my payments.
June 16th of what year?
June 16th, 2022.
Okay.
Just as I just happened to look over my budget because we had some expenses coming up. I have the exhibit that shows the agenda summary report, and nowhere on there are we listed as being notified this was changed. And then I also have an email that I processed. I emailed to Lisa Eckert, Laura Stein, and Maisie Stein on Friday, January 14th of 2022, saying, I'm trying to confirm that I have the accurate information for Sean's car allowance for 2022. Can someone tell me if this is accurate? I do it every year to make sure I'm processing my monthly payments correctly to him. I never got a response from Maisie Stein or anybody in the auditor's office that said, hey, Kelly, we aren't doing this anymore. This isn't how we process Sean's travel. I got nothing. I got back an email that said, hi, Kelly. The attached rates were approved by the commissioners. It's a little less than what you had on your spreadsheet. It should be this. And I attached my spreadsheet that I had done like I do every year. I was completely shocked when I got this email today.
Okay.
And I went and talked to Matt, and I said, Matt, we're coworkers. Couldn't you have called me up and said, hey, we've got a problem here? I work closely with Tim and Tom in the auditor's office. If they had seen that I had done something wrong, they should have let me know. I've processed car allowances for literally 15 years. As of July 27th, is my 15th year with the county. So I feel like this was some type of a political agenda that Matt had. Matt sent the email out. He didn't include Keith Johnson, but he included all the commissioners. I just am very astounded that he sent it to that type of a level, because I said, I can't imagine that Sean would double dip on his car allowance and put himself in a situation where he was not respected by people. I mean, what does he have to gain from that? He's an elected official that he stands to his word, and he.
So have you looked through the whole report on
Mr. Chairman, this is
August
why you don't
26,
accuse
2021?
people of,
How do you not notice that you had to get double pay? I could see it happening once, maybe twice, but for 10 months.
Well, right,
And
that's-
after it has already been brought to our attention previously, I think that maybe you might be looking and seeing why you're getting excess funds in your account. But
I
he
don't
was
know what you mean
cashing the
by-
checks.
Exactly, and you know what? My husband worked for the school district for 36 years, and you know what? He never looked at his paycheck. I was the one that balanced his paycheck, and
Okay.
for whatever reason, that part is not my business.
Okay.
I just wanted to let my part be known.
Thank you.
Because, yeah.
you
Hope I
feel
didn't
free
go over
to,
the 3 minutes.
Kelly, you feel free to speak if you've got more to say, but Mr. Chairman, for the record, this is why you don't accuse people.
I'm not accusing. I've read through the report.
This is
I
a
thoroughly
recorded
went through
meeting. The
report.
public will see your accusations, okay?
I
This
The
is,
want to
report
see the
is
report.
slanderous. It is, it's,
you
It's not
could have at
slanderous.
least
It points out every-
solicited the other side of the story between publicly
Commissioner.
accused, oh, get over it.
if you look
Commissioner
at-
Peck, will you please
I took training on
be
how to
orderly in
do,
this meeting? Quit making, get over it? What's that all about?
What that is I would prefer that the chair do not accuse
I'm
people
not
of illicit.
accusing. I got this.
Excuse me,
I got
if you
this
want to,
as
listen.
an email, and I brought it up as a part of my agenda for the week, Commissioner Peck.
So
Well, I
you don't want me
appreciate-
interrupting you, but it's okay for you to do it. Let me try again. This is a perfect example of why you don't accuse people of illicit activity without hearing both sides of an issue first. You've slandered the good name of a prosecutor, you've slandered an employee, and I would just say, as I did earlier, please be cautious in the words that you choose and the allegations you make until the investigations have run their course. That's what a reasonable, decent, fair person does.
Commissioner Peck, thank you.
so.
You're welcome.
And I will be very cautious about mentioning that you too was abusing the travel allowance.
Now, see,
So,
there's another
Commissioner-
And you
accusation.
too paid a check back to the county.
And you
And I
participating
didn't
with
hear about it
Mr.
until I was told that, oh, he's already paid that back. Commissioner Peck,
Did I have some duty to come back to you with something that I missed?
well, of course, because I kept bringing it up, so I wouldn't bring it up again. But then you wouldn't admit that you did anything wrong, Commissioner Peck. So I think you were caught red-handed, and I don't know about this right here,
Okay, so
but I think
there's,
we'll get to the bottom of it.
so there's
So,
your next
Commissioner-
allegation. Commissioner Didier, while we're at it, let's schedule something on the agenda. Let's not do it today, because this has already gotten a little on edge. But let's have an agenda item to talk about personal property taxes for business. Let's say we do that real
Okay.
soon.
Sure, Commissioner Peck.
So Commissioner Dinner, I really appreciate, I think you listened to me well. I feel like you did. But I just really hope that you'll look at this and see, because I honestly have anything that you would want to look at, any exhibit, anything. And I understand, you know, it sounds crazy to think somebody's paycheck is a little bit more and you don't realize it, but you understand that things change a lot. Like, how long ago, I want to say, there was not that long ago where they changed when we got our insurance, we get an insurance benefit that comes into our check, and it used to be at the end of the month, so our check was always a little bit higher. And that's what Sean thought was happening. But what they actually did was they changed it. I'm not sure when it happened, but they divided it in between both paychecks, so they changed it. But I just think that this went way beyond what had to have happened. I mean, I know for a fact Sean paid the money back today. He didn't realize
He did.
he took care of it.
Well, the
He
evidence
paid it
was so
today.
compelling that I
Well,
would think he would.
Right, the evidence was compelling.
sorry, the evidence of
But it
what?
wasn't because he
Why
did
did
it
he
on
pay it
purpose.
back?
The evidence
Because
of
he-
what?
It was a.
All
it
of
was a-
this.
The
Right.
evidence of what, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
Of
what would you
getting
call?
two amounts of the same travel allowance,
Which you
Thank you.
described earlier as him abusing the system.
double dipping.
You said the
But
word
yet-
abusing.
But yet, if I talked to Matt Beaton myself, he
Okay.
looked everywhere. They gave us absolutely no information that they changed this policy. It's nowhere in any of their paperwork. They
It's
could
right
not
here.
come up with
We
it.
signed it.
No, that is from 2017.
No, this is from 2000, this is August 26th of 2000, right there.
Yes, but where did Sean sign
August
it?
20
But where did Sean sign that? Sean did not sign that. I thought he did too. I was mad at him at first. He did not sign it.
We signed it.
Yes,
We
you
made it
signed
into law. And then here's his email saying that he thought he had some more to add to it, but nothing was added to it.
That had to do with the agenda. That had nothing to do with what this resolution. So if you look, what they did was they went.
Right here, there's his email.
Right, but if you look, changes to the, it was changes to the minutes. If you look right here, they added this right here, which I thought, this was 2017, this is something every elected official has to sign.
I signed it.
Just to
Yep.
show that you are responsible for
Yep,
accounts payable.
yep.
So yeah, I mean, you know, it's, here's the agenda, I took training on how to do agenda summary report. And when you do an agenda summary report,
Okay.
you're supposed to involve everybody who it affects,
Okay.
right? So if you look at the agenda summary report, it's right here.
Well, we're gonna have to carry on with the meeting.
Kelly, you might want to go back to the mic so we can.
Okay. I have the agenda summary report right here, that you have to let someone know in your office if something's getting changed. And we were not notified. I have it right here. This is my exhibit showing the agenda summary report. And nowhere are we listed on that. There's no email in the county that I can find. I even spoke to Matt. He searched for and said, yeah, we couldn't find how we notified you of this. And I have my preliminary budget where I put our travel allowance in the budget, and no one told me that it wasn't supposed to be done that way. Furthermore, I have the email confirming that the spreadsheet I did was accurate, and nobody from the auditor's office said, hey, this is null and void because we aren't even doing it anymore.
Well, I appreciate, Kelly, your
I spent a
time.
lot of time on this today because I've been
Obviously you
very
have.
upset. I don't like the politics, and I don't like what's going on in the county.
Neither do I. But
Well, I'm
when,
glad we both
but when
agree
people are
on
writing
one
checks
thing.
back to the county government, that means I got overpaid. Okay?
Well, you know what, I think that mistakes can happen, and I think that,
Mm-hmm.
that we can all be human beings and realize we're not perfect. And
None of us
I
are.
really don't think that someone who has an elected position, who is a bar-appointed lawyer, attorney, is going to think that I'm gonna try to, rip the county off for $600 a month. I'm sorry, but I just can't see that, so. And I stand on that because I very much respect who I work for, and I have the utmost, I just.
Thank you.
No worries.
Is there any other public comment? No.
Yeah, clearly I'd like to address, since this was something that was, like I said, sent to me this morning. I reviewed through it. I don't know how you guys receive your pay stubs, but I don't go on and pull my pay stubs. I don't have to track vacation. I don't earn vacation leave. I don't earn sick leave. I don't earn any other special leave. My salary is pretty consistent all the way through, as with most elected officials. I went back through after getting this email. I told Kelly, I said, I've never received 2 checks. What are we talking about here? So I went through and I pulled up you have to go into the portal, the employee portal, to log in. I don't do that except for usually to get my W-2 at the end of the year for tax purposes. But in there, the pay stub had made a change where it did reflect a change. It doesn't spell out what it is, but you could find it as indicated in the materials that were sent to you. But the issue is, this came about at the same time of year where usually the Social Security taxes taper off depending on the income. And so there was nothing that really jumped out as any kind of inconsistent payment between the 2 payments that we receive during the month. So I pulled all the payroll, my pay stubs. I reviewed all the payments to double check and make sure that there was an accurate rendition, at least from that portion of it, whether or not a double payment had went out. And after pulling that, it appears that effective I believe it was in September, when this plan took effect, that's when they started adding it to the payroll as regular income. The interesting thing is even at the end of the year report under income, it did not seem to change from where my annual salary is. So somehow there's a glitch. In fact, when I was notified of this was very concerning. I sent a referral immediately to the Attorney General's office, and I asked them to look at this. I said, look, I'm an elected official. I pride myself in doing the right thing. If I'm wrong here, so be it. It appears that I have made or received a double payment. I said I immediately paid this back once I verified with my own pay stubs that it looked like this was erroneous. I appreciate Kelly coming up here. I told her I really didn't want her to, because I said, really, This involves me. I was the one that received it, and for whatever reason, didn't recognize over, when this change happened. I follow the usual process that has been going on for the last 15 years. She files a request for the month that verifies against the rental rate that is determined by Public Works. That's why every year in January, she sends out an email to Public Works to get the rental rate, to make sure it's being recorded accurately, include the auditor's office on that communication. And likewise, the biggest thing I think that she didn't get into this detail, but I think it's very important. On our budget line, it's budget item 4303. That's where the travel allowance is listed for the car allowance, my car allowance specifically. That's where all the deductions come from when payments are being deducted. That has gone on from that bar line. Unbeknownst to our office, unbeknownst to Kelly, they've created a new bar line, which is 430 or 4312, I believe. And that created just a line specifically as car allowance, but it shows an amount in that column as 0, and then it shows the ongoing amounts accrue. It doesn't make sense on how this was done without any kind of notification to our office to ensure that the new policy of having it added to payroll is being properly accounted. It didn't make sense when communication was sent to Public Works, the auditor's office, to get the new amounts. There was no one that said anything that, hey, wait a minute, this is already included in payroll. You don't need to do this, Kelly, because that's being done automatically now through the auditor's office. What's more troubling, I guess, is that it was after this policy was implemented and we presented to this board the budget, which shows the travel allowance line item there, and there was never an indication that there was a need for a change of a new bar number, a change of a line item on there. So that's what Kelly's gone through today to make sure that we've gone through it. But what became clear to me and what required the immediate correction was when I was able to verify that, in fact, it appeared, at least in part, on the pay stub, although I do question because the pay stub data and the W-2 information doesn't seem to reconcile. After I discovered this, I pulled the W-2. It doesn't seem to add up. So I don't know how that's being calculated. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that this is getting thoroughly reviewed. I made a request of the AG's office to have someone look at it. I requested also that the AG's office send this to the state auditor's office so they could pull it and review it. Make sure that, because if it's happening to me, I have to think, okay, I'm trying to do the right thing all the time, but what about if someone was attempting to defraud our county again?
There's only 4 of us that are getting this, Sean.
Great, I hope everybody,
Us
but
three
I'm
and
not
you.
talking about this. I'm not talking about this issue. What I'm concerned about is when we have reports, our office just recently had to send out a notice to another vendor who was erroneously paid about a year ago when the correct vendor inquired why they hadn't received their payment. That came to our office and we reached out to that vendor and they immediately sent a correction and paid it back. I'm not faulting people, but clearly any system, as we've heard from our auditor, any system is subject to fault. That's why I've asked the AG as well as the SAO to look at this and make sure that, because this is a relatively simple issue. This is an issue of a double payment that came out through a process that we have been following prior to my arrival at the county. That's a process that's gone on for 15 years, and no notification was made to the office manager who submits these vouchers. I'm simply the second signature on those approving that. Oftentimes, it's also approved by one of my other deputies, my chief criminal deputy or my chief civil, because we have that 2-part signature within our office. Vouchers are prepared by one individual. The approving authority is by other individuals in the office. So I just want to make sure that the commissioners understand that obviously this is a serious issue. I wish I was given at least notice to say, hey, can you explain this? Because that's why Kelly then spent most of her day going through and trying to gather communications, records from the budget to ensure how did we miss this. One of the key words that says there, as you look at the agenda, when this policy came into effect last year, and as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, August 26th, it says on the background, it says no changes to vehicle allowances are proposed in this resolution. The purpose of this resolution is only to streamline administrative processes. That would seem like this is much greater than an administrative process. I remember hearing earlier discussions about this where there was a submission where I would submit monthly
mileage statements where I use mileage, like traveling in business, in town, going to meetings, going out to calls. I would send that to the auditor's office. Auditor's office had made mention that, hey, you do this sometimes, you don't do it other times. We're going to streamline, we'll streamline that process. That's when I heard streamlining a process, it's like, okay, I'm going to keep track of these records. If I need to deduct it for business travel, that seemed like that's an accounting burden shifted to me, which I'm perfectly fine with. That's something that then I would do when I submit my own taxes to the IRS, that if I did travel for business, I could deduct certain expenses there. So I just want to highlight that there's nothing nefarious here, and I fully agree. I want the AG's office to review this. I want the state auditor's office to review it, because I've been in the same position coming to the board when I've presented things, and sometimes it goes on for, several years before someone pays something back. I would like to address the other issue, though. You kind of alluded that there was some other kind of wrongdoing, and I want to address that. Back in 2012, there was a correction with the car allowance amount, and that was about the time that it was discovered that Mr. Houston was committing a fraud on the county. There was a reevaluation after the fact. So what happened in that particular year, they found out that the numbers that were used that were established at the beginning of the year were then later changed. In other words, everybody was turning in vouchers and submitting things based on the information that was provided in January of that year. What turned out to come later is, after a state auditor's office came in and others reviewed this in more detail, they said, wait a minute, those car allowance rates were artificially inflated for whatever reason. We could think that maybe that's how the money was being hid or whatever. So when that was reviewed, it was then sent back to those that were receiving the car allowance at the time, saying, hey, this is what has now been corrected. Corrected after the fact, have you? And I think that's extremely different. When you're told that, hey, this is what it's going to be for the year, you submit those vouchers, you get paid that amount, but then in November, December timeframe, you're told, hey, this is actually wrong, you owe the county back $3,000. I did the exact same thing then that I did just today. I saw that, I saw the numbers, I thought it was a little fishy that I'm relying upon information that was determined and set by the county in January. Then they basically moved the goalpost. We've heard that terminology a lot. So they changed the rules at the end of the year and said, hey, that amount was erroneous. But like you said, this is taxpayer money. I'm not going to argue that. When it was determined that, hey, that needed to be corrected, many of us did. And I believe Commissioner Peck and Commissioner Miller were one of the other affected parties on that, because Commissioner Cook at the time, I believe, had a county vehicle, so he didn't receive the car allowance. So those elected officials immediately, upon receiving notice that there was a corrective change, not some nefarious double dip or something like that, but a corrective change where the public works rental rate was corrected at the end of the year, those elected officials, including myself, made an immediate repayment. I can't say the same when that's happened with others, but to me, that's what you gotta do. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer them. I told the state AG's office I would make myself available to any investigative agency or investigator to answer further questions. I pointed out the two key witnesses for my office, those that also sign and approve vouchers, in particular these vouchers that are in question today. So I just appreciate it. It's always great to get the other side of the story before we start throwing things out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you for paying that back immediately. I mean,
Yes.
I think that was the right thing to do. I do have a question, and I'm only asking because I'm not sure, but on resolutions, are they looked over after they're passed by your office?
If it's something that pertains to our office, I'll look at it.
Just any
We
resolution.
don't scroll through every single resolution that goes.
No, I'm just asking. I mean, who
Yeah.
approves them? I mean, if we make a resolution, I would hope that somebody would double check to make sure it's correct. That's my question.
Yeah, I think that's a good, interesting question. Unfortunately, my office is slammed right now. I'm down 3 attorneys that we are fortunate. We have a new attorney starting on July 5, and the next one is going to be starting in August. But that's just to address the criminal case backlog.
Sure,
That-
I
and
understand.
that still leaves a vacancy in my office. I think certainly that would be a good practice, but I could tell you right now, our civil department would not have the ability to review every single resolution. Usually if there's a question, there's a legal question that happens well before the resolution process, and that comes to our office for review, but not on all resolutions. Usually that's for issues that come up from time to time that might be a little bit more complex, and we certainly welcome that. I would much rather have that consultation occur, and if it's something that we can't do by the next meeting at the following week, I would think that sometimes it errs on the side of taking the right amount of time so that we could have a thorough review, make sure that we're addressing the item on the agenda, and so that way it could be well backed. And that way, if you have a commission or a question on a particular resolution, hopefully it's been something that we've been able to review, and we could provide some legal insight on what those might be.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
And there is a box on the agenda summary report for coordination. And for as long as I've been a commissioner, I have begged people to use that to ensure that all the affected offices and agencies see it, that it's indicated in the box that they've seen it, and whether they concur, non-concur, or it's for information only. And it's long past time we made that a requirement of ASRs. Like I said, I've been asking for that since the day I got here.
Well, they should be double checked.
It's the only way, well, they should be coordinated and reviewed before they come to this board so that we don't pass garbage. And once they're passed, there shouldn't be any need at that point for them to then be double checked again. The coordination and the vetting needs to happen before it comes to us so that we pass good, clean resolutions. And that's where the problem is that the coordination is not being done.
And I concur that we need to make sure that our resolutions are legal and binding.
And commissioners, you know, I'm glad, this isn't really on the agenda, but I will add because I think it is timely. We do have budget cycle coming up. Obviously, our office has experienced needs over the last, growing needs over the last 3 years. We felt that it was appropriate to make sure that we weren't asking this board for anomaly years where, hey, we have a high workload now, let's go ask for more support. I wanted to make sure that this seems to be a continuous and unfortunate, as you probably could see from the news. We're not slowing down due to lack of work for our office. And I think that you're going to find when we come to the board this budget session and asking for that assistance, that's one of the issues that's going to be addressed, is trying to make sure that we have resources on our risk management side, making sure that we're able to have the resources available to provide the complexity review, like the land use issues that come before the board on a regular basis. In fact, one of the attorneys that we're looking at and hoping to bring to the office actually has an interest in that area. And I think that would be a great asset for this county, as I think this board recognizes we are no longer this small rural county like we used to be just 15 years ago. We have grown tremendously, and unfortunately that includes not just a criminal aspect, but also the complexity of issues on the civil arena. And I would certainly welcome trying to provide that additional service for the board and to Mr. Johnson to make sure that you have that resource, that review, the time to be able to give a thorough evaluation rather than just an ad hoc kind of approach. So I'd be glad to work with you in doing that, and I know we have some requests that will be coming up with this year's budget request to try to address some of those issues. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
I would just like to make one more comment, that I would respectfully request that we look at the reason why it took from August to now for the auditor's office to find this problem. I don't have the, what do you call it? I don't have in front of me all the job titles of the auditor's office, but they have a director of audit services, they have a director of accounting, they have a director of fiscal whatever. And I wish I had that in front of me because I would like to say it accurately. But if we have been scrutinized so seriously about this, what's the other side of the scrutiny as to how this happened for so long? If we have that many directors in the auditor's office that should be, I mean, I realize this is a huge county and I realize that there's a lot of expenses, but when you submit a resolution that changes a policy and your office is in charge of that, then shouldn't you make sure that everybody in your office understands that, hey, this is being moved to payroll, This is taking out of accounts payable. So we need to make sure going forward that this policy that we created and we approved and we did a resolution on is being followed. And I would suggest that we also look at that side of this issue too. Thank you.
You know,
Thank you.
Every week when Commissioner Mullen makes a motion to approve warrants, he points out that these warrants have been reviewed and signed off by 2 members of the auditor's office. Somebody's not reviewing them very closely.
Well, those are warrants.
And that's where this gets paid from.
Well, it is.
And the same statement gets made with payroll.
And who's responsible for notification? We need to make sure that people are notified then. Right, Keith?
That would be under the coordination of the agenda summary reports. Before these resolutions are approved, they need to be coordinated with all the affected offices. This one was not.
Is there anybody else for public comment?
George Dockstetter, Self Landing Road. The way I heard everybody talking back and forth, Matt Beaton mailed it to the county commissioners, but he didn't notify Keith Johnson, and he didn't notify our prosecuting attorney direct. Sounds to me like he's still crying in his diapers over the damn car wreck that you guys should have made him pay for in the first place, and he's just trying to get even.
I believe he did send it to Sean Sant.
I was CC'd on the same email.
Anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone, Keith?
No callers.
Okay, with that, we'll move down to administrative office business.
I think I've covered what I needed to with my administrator update regarding the HAPO Center and the Public Safety Building. Those are the only things. Just want to make sure the board was aware that we'll address those next Tuesday.
Okay. Is there, now we're down to the last public comment. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.